The author recounts his adventures as a big game guide and hunter in Central Africa. There are stories about all the animals you would expect: lions, elephants, rhino, buffalo, and so forth. But my favorite tales were in the chapter titled Underrated Killers. It will be easy for you to see why the author called this one of the strangest evenings of his life. Tale of the Man-Eating Lady by Peter Hathaway Capstick. It was a two-man professional safari of 21 days. The guests were European, a husband and wife, and the husband's brother, who was my charge, while the second professional, George, was guiding the couple. We were quite a long way out, hunting elephant from a small fly camp, and had been getting along famously over the first few days. The sun had dropped like a hot rock, and after dinner and a few dollops, to keep off the dew, George and I had said goodnight and bedded down in the small tent we shared, 100 yards from the larger client's tent. We were just about asleep, a half hour later, when cries of, "Peter! George! Come quickly!" shot us bolt upright and snatching for rifles, flashlights, and snakebite kits. We threw on bush hooks and dashed barefoot to the tents, horrified at what we might find. As we pulled up, puffing, the husband hunched out of the tent, his arms streaming blood, and stood alongside the brother, who was sucking a nasty-looking laceration on his hand. George and I stared at each other in complete confusion, then at the tent. "In there! In there!" the husband shouted. I took the light, George covering me with the rifle, as I threw back the flap, expecting at least a wholesale lot of lions to come boiling out into my lap. She was in a night. I looked around. Except for the diminutive wife, the tent was empty. She was in a nightgown, half smiling at me. I walked over for a look under the bed and to ask her what in the world was going on, when she lunged at me, grabbed my hand, and, growling like a honey badger, tried to bite me. I shouted for George to get in there as I struggled with her, trying to keep her jaws away with all my strength, as she snapped, snarled, and bit like a certifiable banana, slippery as an eel, and twice as fast. It was like one of those heavy dessert nightmares, in which you have a huge snake by the throat that keeps slipping away. The power of the small woman was terrifying, despite the fact that I outweighed her by 90 pounds and was a good foot tall. George ducked in and gaped in amazement until I finally got him to get with it and grab an arm. Together we struggled to pin her to the bed, where she ultimately lay, hardly gasping. She closed her eyes and suddenly stopped trying to pull her wrist free, relaxing like a wet sock. Feeling a bit stupid, we released her, thinking she had come to her senses. She lay for a few seconds, watching us through half-closed eyes, as we tried to reason with her, then, in a lightning lunge, wrapped her arms around George's leg and sank her teeth into his bare calf. He gave a most unprofessional bellow of pain, and we peeled her off, George wilting the canvas, with a spontaneous offer of very colorful Rhodesian idioms suited to the occasion. Switching from George, she then concentrated in gnawing off my thumb, an activity at which she was not entirely without skill. I yelled and shook loose, wrenching her wrist behind her until George worked up the nerve to dodge past her kicking feet, grab them, and lever her back onto the bed. She stayed relatively quiet for several minutes although we knew better now than to release our grip. After a long pause, having garnered her power, she slowly concentrated her supernatural strength on her right arm, which I was holding down. To my utter disbelief, she raised me right off the bed, forced my hands away, and tried to bite me again. To tell the truth, we were not a little frightened, for her or us. She was clearly completely out of her skull, although it didn't seem at all like a fit wherein I imagined she would foam at the mouth or do something else picturesque. Her actions seemed too deliberate, with too much strategy to be entirely wild, yet what could account for her unbelievable strength? I'd heard of women rolling cars off their trapped children single-handed under duress, but what could have caused this? Bit by bit, her attacks grew less frequent, and she slipped away for a few moments of sleep, although she would still try to bite us any time she had an opening. Eventually, after 3 hours, she fell deeply asleep and showed no more signs of violence. We watched her for another hour and then suggested the brother and husband play bachelor in the second tent while George and I split the night watch. The next morning, the lady was up and dressed by dawn, as rested and vital as if she'd had a full night's sleep. She seemed puzzled when she found me outside the tent and the husband in with the brother, both of them looking like sheiks in their mercurochrome wrappings, that she apparently remembered nothing of the night before. I left it up to the family to explain, but what in the world they might have told her, I couldn't imagine. The best guess George and I could make of it was that it had been some kind of wild reaction to a combination of antibiotic, anti-malarial prophylaxis, and whiskey she had mixed up that night after dinner. Whatever. It sure did a lot to shore up my flagging belief in possession by demons. Maybe George summed it up best later, inspecting the wound on his leg. Well, he mused laconically, that's bloody Africa for you. Everything bites.